Everybody. Okay, so today what I want to talk about is Facebook's ban on advertising, but also page restriction or limited access. So essentially, what Facebook is doing is they're going through all the pages on Facebook and then banning the page owner's ability to promote or advertise that page. But it's not even just promotion of the page, but advertising in general. Also, it's restricting the distribution of that page to not just your own subscriber base, but to Facebook in general. So let's take a quick look at that. Let's see what's going on. So I noticed about a week ago that my page was no longer loading in the new user interface. I had it in dark mode, and the page just wouldn't load. So I flipped it back to classic mode. So I'm guessing there was some sort of bug. But in classic mode, all of a sudden you see this warning saying page not allowed to advertise. You can't create ads or promote your page because it's been restricted from advertising. So you can't promote. If we go see the details about this, let's take a look at what it says. The page isn't allowed to advertise because it has repeatedly posted content that has been debunked by third-party fact checkers. This behavior means the page hasn't complied with our misinformation advertising policy, which is a requirement for advertising on Facebook. Its ads have been disabled and it is currently can't create or run new ads. So let's go take a look at that advertising policy. 13, misinformation. So supposedly this page is distributing misinformation. Policy. Facebook prohibits ads that include claims debunked by third-party fact checkers or, in certain circumstances, claims debunked by organizations with particular expertise. Advertisers that repeatedly post information deemed to be false may have restrictions placed on their ability to advertise on Facebook. Find out more about fact-checking on Facebook here. Examples would be ads containing claims which are debunked by third-party fact-checker, ads which include misinformation about vaccines is identified by and verified by global health organizations such as the World Health Organization, the WHO. Now, that's strange. I haven't made any ads that contained debunked information from fact checkers or anything about vaccines. Most of my ads are about Star Wars or politics in general, such as Recall Gavin Newsom, or just various videos that I've created that are meant for entertainment purposes or documentary purposes. Let's take a look. What else can we see here? This just takes me back. Also, there was a interesting thing here. Page transparency. Facebook is showing information to help you better understand the purpose of a page. See actions taken by the people who manage and post content. So they're doxing the page owner. That's lovely. Well, in my case, it doesn't matter. I use my name anyways. I'm not hiding, but a lot of pages or businesses wouldn't necessarily want the admin or the page owner to put out their information like that. So it seems like that would actually contradict Facebook's own policy of doxing, but whatever. Let's get more to the point of what, again, they're saying that my ads somehow violated their terms of service. Let's review the ratings. Your page has reduced distribution and other restrictions because of a repeated sharing of false news. People will also be able to see if a page has a history of sharing false news. Number one, this page is not a news site. I am not creating news. If anything, I create content that's documentary in nature, maybe, or entertainment based, or I share stuff I saw on the internet. Nothing here is claiming to be news. And the page has reduced distribution and other restrictions because of repeated sharing of false news. I didn't create any news. So what could they possibly be talking about? So there's, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 incidences in some. The first one is independent fact checkers at USA Today say that information in this post shared by Jay Lindsay is missing context and could mislead people. We've added a notice to the post. Footage from 2016 proves Joe Biden actually did call troops bastards at Air Force Base in Abu Dhabi. Fact check. Joe Biden called troops stupid bastards, but only jokingly. Okay, so what? He did call them stupid bastards. And what? Because the title didn't say, but only jokingly, that's somehow false news? Let's take a look at this.
Surfaced video shows presidential.
And by the way, this is from OAN. This is not content I created. It was just literally, if you copy a link from someplace like OAN and share it onto Facebook in your page, you are now guilty. If they view this YouTube your video, which is not even on Facebook, and it's not even my content, it's OAN's content, which is talking about the presidential debate, you too can lose your ability to advertise. Let's have a look.
President Trump called out Biden for his comments during Tuesday night's debate, with Biden claiming he never said that. The following footage contradicts that claim, and now you can watch for yourself and see if Biden's words show respect for our men and women in uniform.
He called the military stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape. He said stupid bastards. He said it.
Stop.
I would never say that to the military.
Play it.
I have incredibly good judgment. One, I married Jill. And two, I appointed Johnson to the academy. I just want you to know that. Just clap for that, you stupid bastard. Just clap for that, you stupid bastard. Just clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Want to see more videos like this?
Okay, well, that doesn't sound jokingly. It sounded like he was directing the crowd to clap and actually insulted them. Well, what about that was funny or jokingly? I don't know. But I failed to see how independent fact checker at USA Today could say that the information in this post shared is missing context and could mislead people. No, he actually said stupid bastard. And he meant it in a disparaging or insulting way, or at least that's how I heard it or saw it. You tell me. You be the judge. But let's see what fact check says. So, Facebook, how the independent fact check selected on Facebook. I don't care about that. Here's the USAtoday.com. Who owns USA Today, by the way? I'm guessing some left-wing group. Okay, fact check. Joe Biden called troops stupid bastards, but only jokingly. The claim former Vice President Joe Biden called troops stupid bastards. A September story, The Atlantic, reported that President Donald Trump had called service members who died at war losers and suckers. Now posts online have begun to claim that his opponent in the presidential contest, former Vice President Joe Biden, disrespected the troops too. A video posted to Facebook claims Biden called American troops stupid bastards. Notwithstanding what you may hear about me, I have incredibly good judgment, Biden remarks in the video. One, I married Jill, and two, I appointed Johnson to the academy. I just want you to know that. Fact or fiction, we're fact-checking the news and sending it to your inbox. Sign up to get that here. After a moment of silence, Biden tells, so they advertise as well in their fact check. That's great. After a moment of silence, Biden tells the troops, clap for that, you stupid bastards. Even in the fact check, they don't add in a joking way. You be the judge on whether this is disrespectful. The caption of the video reads, what would the media say if President Trump did this? ? The user behind the post did not respond to a request from USA Today for comment. Footage is real, but campaign claims Biden made the remark jokingly. Oh, because they claimed it was jokingly, therefore it must be in jest, not in disparaging way. Okay, so that seems bogus. That sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Class action. Let's see here. So my second content strike that prevents me, an American, from exercising my First Amendment right to speech and to advertise. What was it? Citizen? Was it? I don't think it was Citizen United. What was the one that says that corporations spending money on ads constitutes as speech? Corporations spending money on ads equals speech. What was that called? Yeah, it was Citizen United versus the FECC Wikipedia. Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission was a landmark decision of the Supreme Court of the United States concerning campaign finance. The court held that the free speech clause of the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent expenditures for political communications by corporations, including nonprofit corporations, labor unions, and associations. The case arose after Citizen United, a conservative nonprofit organization, sought to air and advertise a film critical of the Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton shortly before 2008 Democratic primaries election. This would have been a violation of the 2002 Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which blah, blah, blah. So basically, a corporation, a nonprofit, is allowed to spend money, and whatever they say in that advertisement is protected by the First Amendment, free speech. But free speech already applies to American citizens, which is myself. So what Facebook is doing here by restricting my page for sharing a link or even claiming that it somehow has to do with the ad that I'm actually advertising are all infringements on my free speech. So this is constitutional. Let's see here. Let's continue. Okay, so the second one. Evidence some wildfires in California, Oregon were started by arson, but the media still lies. So this was a Glenn Beck video post.
I don't know if you saw the news yesterday. Now, this is a record. Now, why? Why would these records be being broke all the time? Well, it's climate change. It's getting so bad right now. Is it? On Monday, wildfires destroyed in Washington state alone 330,000 acres of brush and timber. Now, one reason these things happen, not climate change, is because the wildlife and the Forest Service, they're not allowed to do what everyone who's ever lived around forests and trees know you have to do. You have to have controlled burns. If you don't, lightning strikes and it burns the whole thing down because that's the way nature does it. So you have controlled burns. So when there's a lightning strike, it doesn't happen. But no, it's natural to have all of that underbrush. No, it's not. But that's not what's going on. On Monday, 58 fires started in Washington state. 58. 9 significant fires. Well, yesterday, in a press conference, the State Public Lands Commissioner, Hillary Franz, said 58 fires across the state were started on Monday. We were able to put most of them out. An estimated 330,000 acres of our state burned in just 24 hours. More acres burned yesterday than in 12 of the last entire fire seasons in Washington state. She said, quote, "We believe today that all of these are human-caused in some dimension."
Arson.
58 fires, all set on Monday. According to Hillary Franz, it's not climate change. It was started by humans either being stupid or arson. Now, how dare you? Have you not seen PolitiFact? Have you not seen the news gods that have told us, bow down, don't you dare say there's any arson going on. There's nothing. And if you say it's arson, how dare you even say that these peaceful protesters with Antifa have anything to do with fires? Yes, they'll set our cities on fire. Yes, they're calling for revolution, but they wouldn't do that. That's just over the top. Well, I asked my staff to see if there was any evidence on fires. And I don't mean evidence from Twitter. I mean evidence. Is there anybody who's been arrested for arson? Is there anybody that's been arrested for mischief with fire? Here they are. And YouTube and Facebook, go ahead. I want you to demonetize this clip. I want you to somehow or another say that we're lying. I want you to throttle it. Go ahead. Because then you're going to have to explain what we got wrong. And I happen to have all the documents right here. So my attorney is really ready for that dethrottling or demonetization. You say you're a protector of the truth? Great. Here it is. First one, Washington State, Jeffrey Accord, 36, Puyallup, Washington, September 9th. A BLM activist. 1 count of reckless burning, 2nd degree. Transferred and charged with 1 count burglary, no reported damage. According to Accord's history of anti-police protesting and the encounters with law enforcement, he was arrested during the Ferguson riots in Missouri. Christine Camello, 36, Spokane, Washington, September 7th. No known political affiliation. 1 count, 2nd degree arson. 1 count, 1st degree arson. 1 count, burglary. In Oregon, Domingo Lopez, 45, Portland, September 14th. Reckless burning, second.
So here's a related video.
She sees somebody in the streets that she thinks is an arsonist. Look what this lady does. If you haven't already seen this video, no, she is not playing.
This is also on her property.
This is also on her property,
Yeah.
yes, which...
Get on the floor! Get on the floor right now! Stay down! What are you doing in my property?
Boom, has a gun in her hand.
Did you light anything on fire? No, ma'am. What are you doing with those matches on your head?
I smoke. See?
Yeah, there's a cigarette butt.
Saying smoking cigarette. That's some
I
gangster mode right
like...
there.
Would you want her as a neighbor? Who would want her as a neighbor,
Hell
by the way? If
yeah.
you're watching this right
Not
now,
if
who
you're
would...
level below where she's at, because she might be doing that to anybody that does something she finds suspicious. On the ground, gun drawn. Are you chewing gum?
I'd like to know what happened with that guy. How long ago is this? A couple days ago?
This is a couple days ago.
Yeah, I'd like to know what happened with
This
that guy. On fire everywhere. What do you think should happen to that guy if he is guilty of arson?
Oh my God, the book, the entire book thrown at him. The
Death
highest
penalty?
Well, not death penalty, but unless people were killed, unless people died from the fire he started, then maybe that's some sort of a homicide charge or something. But no, arsonists are the lowest of the scum, especially in a situation like this, especially as fast. I mean, sick individual.
Fire. What is the...
Well, if it's an accident, it's nothing. It's a misdemeanor. Arson's got to be a felony. It has to be.
Arson's got to be a felony. At the level of what they're doing right now,
Yeah.
yes. If the person gets...
So, like Glenn Beck says at the beginning,
Is a record. Now, why? Why would these records be being broke all the time? Well, it's climate change. It's getting so bad. They're not allowed to do what everyone who's 8 fires started in Washington State. 58. 9 significant fires. Well, yesterday, in a press conference, The state public lands commissioner, Hilary Franz, said 58 fires across the state were started on Monday. We were able to put most of them out. An estimated 330,000 acres of our state burned in just 24 hours. More acres burned yesterday than in 12 of the last entire fire seasons in Washington state. She said, quote, "We believe today that all of these are human-caused in some dimension."
So who was that?
Conference, the state public lands commissioner.
State Public Lands Commissioner. State Public Lands Commissioner. Hillary something. Hilary Franz. Arson. If I could spell today, that would be nice. Video. So here's the public statement.
Thank you, Governor. And wildfire fighting we saw Labor Day is my worst fear. I know it's yours as well. We've witnessed heartbreaking and surreal destruction over the past 24 hours. More than 300,000 acres in Washington have burned since Monday. That's more than double the number of acres for the entire year last year. Thousands of homes are without power. Many families have had to evacuate their homes, and many homes, sadly, have been lost. The destruction in the small town of Malden, the governor mentioned, south of Spokane, is unimaginable. We've not seen that kind of devastation here, with reports of 80% of their homes being burned to the ground. And my heart breaks for those residents and for all those who have lost their homes or are dealing with the challenges of evacuation. Currently, the largest fire is the Pearl Hill Cold Spring Fire near Omak, which has east and west. The hard work of our firefighters critically. The hurricane force. This approach has helped us keep our firefighters on the ground with a focus, making sure is currently in the air. 14 rotors plus 2.
So, anyways, this lady is the state commissioner, Hilary Franz, said that how much of this, Glenn Beck, is arson?
Hilary Franz said 58 fires across the state were started on Monday. We were able to put most of them out. An estimated 330,000 acres of our state burned in just 24 hours. More acres burned yesterday than in 12 of the last entire fire seasons in Washington state.
Yes, but
she said, quote, "We believe today that all of these are human-caused in some dimension." 58 fires, all set on Monday. According to Hilary Franz, it's not climate change. It was started by humans either being stupid or arson. Now, how...
Okay. So this entire video is being struck as fake news because Glenn Beck is quoting Hilary Franz, the Washington Commissioner of Public Lands, who stated that the wildfires were human-caused, whether it was arson or accident. Either way, that's not... I mean, how is that fake news? That sounds like actual news. Now, the issue seems to be about connecting that to Antifa, who was, in fact, committing arson in Oregon, in Washington, and California, and New York, and YouTube, Antifa, arson. So why wouldn't they be natural... Antifa, arson, Washington State. Okay. Here was another one.
The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force moved in on this Tacoma home before noon today. Neighbors heard glass shattering and flashbang grenades as agents swarmed the rented home on South G Street.
It's just scary to have that a couple houses down from you and having no idea, what's going on.
These evidence photos from May 30th show who the task force was after. This woman is accused of setting fire to 5 police vehicles parked in the Pine Street area when vandals and looters tore through downtown.
I'm all for peaceful protesting that's going on right now, but the whole anarchy thing of setting things on fire and destroying things and destroying property like that, it doesn't solve anything.
A federal criminal complaint. The arsonist has a tattoo on her hand that says WAIF, W-A-I-F. Agents searched for matching tattoos in the missing persons database and found Margaret A. Channon missing out of Texas with a distinguishable WAIF tattoo on her left hand. Agents learned she now lives in the G Street home in Tacoma and ID'd her as their suspect.
The house is being rented by a woman who's only been there a short time, staying with her for a while.
The feds don't believe Channon is part of any extremist group, that she came to Seattle and joined the protests, acting on her own. In Tacoma, Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
So the issue is Antifa has been committing arson in cities. Antifa members, whether they're loosely affiliated or organized, is kind of irrelevant. We see tons of cities catching on fire, lots of riots, and then all of a sudden we get the entire West Coast, Washington, Portland, and California catch up in flames, and they're even bigger than 2016, 17, and 18, which were the biggest fires up to that point. And now in 2020, it's even bigger. And we have the Washington commissioner saying they're all human started. And here's Glenn Beck, who does have a media outlet, the Blaze, who was a former Fox and CNN host, except now he struck out on his own. He owns his own media brand, saying, hey, there's a link between Antifa and the fires. Okay, so by sharing this link, if you copy this link and you put it into Facebook somewhere as a post, you're going to get your page struck down by USA Today fact checkers, who are going to say that you, not going back, but you, Josh Lindsay, are fake news. You, Jay Lindsay, are fake news because you shared a link. How dare you, sir? This is such bullshit, man. Okay, so that's the fact check for strike number 2. Let's see what strike number 3 is. Let's see what we got here. Is Antifa starting wildfires? So it's another link about Antifa starting wildfires. It turns out Facebook is very concerned about you sharing links that suggest that Antifa might have started the wildfires. They don't seem to care that they were rioting and setting cities on fire. They only care if they were responsible for starting wildfires. Let's take a look.
Were the wildfires?
So here we have Mr. Reagan, who has 281,000 subscribers, who is actually, I think he's part of the Blaze as a commentator. So it would make sense for him to take up the story that Glenn Beck was talking about, and he did it on September 11th, on 9/11, which was the 19th anniversary of a terrorist attack on America. And by the way, all this Antifa stuff, all these, if this was in fact started by Antifa, would be considered a terrorist event. The fact that Antifa and BLM set committed arson on actual cities is domestic terrorism. So if anything, we should be inspecting this. We shouldn't be trying to downplay this. But here's Mr. Reagan, who's also part of the Blaze. So obviously he too is going to get struck for this as well. Let's see what he has to say about Antifa starting wildfires.
Started by Antifa.
Mr. Reagan. In this issue of the Crusader, the communists call not only for extensive chaos within the cities, but for putting to the torch every village, every forest, every field, and every barn. The plan is for raging fires from one city to the next. Robert Williams says this: a few years of violent, sporadic, and highly destructive uprisings will set the stage for the grand finale. After the stage is properly set through protracted struggle, America could be brought to her knees in 90 days of highly organized, fierce fighting, sabotage, and massive firestorm.
Now, I have heard from police in Oregon that at least some of the current fires are suspected to have been set by Antifa.
So he's saying some, but the state commissioner said all. All 50-something were started by humans. whether it was arson or accident. Mr. Reagan is trying to say only some.
Now, if Antifa is doing this, I desperately hope the FBI or local police can prove it, because this is going way, way, way too far.
And he qualifies it, says if. He didn't assert it was, he said if.
This is totally within the game plan of Antifa. It makes total sense for them to do this. But let's talk about that later. For right now, let's assess the damage.
The biggest of those fires is burning across California, Oregon, and Washington. Hundreds of thousands.
The entire West Continental States. The entire West Coast. Gee, shouldn't there be some investigation?
Of acres have so far been razed, and extreme heat and high winds continue to fuel the fires to near uncontrollable.
Oh no, we can't attribute humans to doing this, because as Gavin Newsom said, the fires are due to global warming. Let's see if we can find that clip while this goes on.
Levels.
The fires have killed 15 people.
Here we go. Here's Gavin Newsom. Oh God, I hate it when it's not on YouTube. I don't want to watch your stupid.
Destroyed entire towns, hundreds of people's homes, and who knows how much ecological damage has been done. Now, this is incredibly personal to me.
118,000 acres were burned in 2019 by this time last year. You can see close to just shy of 2.3 million acres have been burned this year. Historic is a term we seemingly often use here in the state of California, but these numbers bear fruit to that assertion. I quite literally have no patience for climate change deniers. It simply follows completely inconsistent, that point of view, with the reality on the ground, the facts as we are experiencing. You may not believe it intellectually, but your own eyes, your own experiences tell a different story, particularly out here in the West Coast of the United States, and particularly here in the state of California. Okay,
so we got a contradiction here. Gavin Newsom saying it's global warming that caused the fires, even though Antifa was setting fires to LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, New York, committing arson on purpose. Then we have the Washington State Commissioner of Public Land saying that all 55-something fires were created by humans, whether it was arson or accidental. So obviously they're already contradicting each other. And all these two, Glenn Beck and Mr. Reagan, are saying is pointing out that, hey, not only is it arson, but it's probably Antifa.
Oregon is arguably the worst hit state currently, and one of the fires was moving directly towards my parents' house just the other.
So anyways, that's strike number 2. Let's see what should we go for strike? Let's see what the fact check says. Fact check says, are wildfires raging in the West Coast evidence of a coordinated campaign by Antifa to burn the county down? No, that's not true. Unequivocally. Somehow they already did the investigation. They've already done the forensic. They know beyond, without a shadow of a doubt, no, that's not true. Although authorities have reported at least 2 arrests for arson. Oh, now they're backtracking. There's 2 arrests for arson. They have specifically said the claim of an Antifa forest fire campaign is 100% false, and repeatedly asked the public to stop spreading rumors. So there's public officials saying they're all started by people. There's video evidence of Antifa and BLM, by the way, setting fires to cities, but somehow or another they know for a fact that none of those people had anything to do with setting fire to the forest. Okay, the posting of the claim have offered no evidence linking Antifa to the fires. The FBI's Portland office tweeted a statement making it clear the rumors were false. How do they know? They didn't investigate. The claim appeared in a Facebook post archived here. I guess we'll look at it. Why not? Because tweets now constitute law, right? If if the FBI, who claimed Russia was true, turned out to be false after 3 years of investigation, therefore, this is now gospel. What the fuck? This archive sucks. This is a god-awful page. Why would they link us here? The evidence is mounting. This is a coordinated effort to burn the county down. There is only one group that's been causing problems in our county recently, Antifa. It's obvious. They have no problem with people dying to prove a point. Does it make you wonder how many years this has been happening? It should. A war between, and it's all bad. A.J. Hoover on Thursday. Who is this? Why do I care what he says? The evidence is mounting. Okay, so the post included links of 5 news stories, including 2 that detailed the arrest people accused of intentionally starting fires. Notably, one of the 5 stories has been conducted. Reports that exist. Blah blah blah. Authorities have conducted claims. FBI reports that extremists are setting fires. Let's take a look. Misinformation from the trusted official source. The FBI, Portland, and local law enforcement agencies have been receiving reports that extremists are responsible for setting wildfires in Oregon. With our state and local partners, the FBI has investigated several such reports and found them to be untrue. Really? Where? Oh, because it's on Twitter now. Conspiracy theories and misinformation take valuable resources away from local fire and police agencies. Okay, so. Oh, therefore it must be false. Elsewhere in Oregon, this is so dumb. Why do we care what these people think? Okay, so that's fact check number 3, I believe. Should we go for fact check number 4? Let's see what fact check number 4 has. What's behind door number 4? Let's see here. Jay Lindsay shared information that's been reviewed by the AFP Africa. We've added a notice to the post so that others can see that it's false. False video gives no proof of a purported plan to depopulate Africa. Uses lawyer's interview out of context. Does it? Let's take a look. And by the way, this is just sharing a link. I didn't write anything. I didn't give a summary of anything. All you do is share a link, and whatever that link has inside of it, you're now guilty of. So guilt by association and anti-free speech. So AFP, fact check. Who is AFP? Factcheckafp.com. Who in the world are these guys? Anti-vaccine video falsely claims to expose a purported Bill Gates plan to depopulate Africa. A YouTube video featuring Harvard Law professor enumerates Alan Dershowitz has been viewed thousands of times in posts that claim it exposes a plan by American billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates to forcefully vaccinate and depopulate Africans amid the novel coronavirus pandemic. But this is false. Oh, it's unequivocally false. Dershowitz was talking about the people of New York while answering questions about the constitutionality of mandatory vaccination under U.S. law. He made no reference to Africans, Gates, or depopulation. Let's take a look. Okay, that's just a screen grab. If you refuse to vaccinate, the state has the power to literally take you to the doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm if the vaccination is designed to prevent the spreading of disease. Dershowitz is heard saying in the footage, an interview taken out of context. Let's put it back into context then. And by the way,
this country
let's have a look. So this video is 40 minutes long, and in the first 25 minutes, let's see what they talk about.
People who watch Crowdsource the Truth have been very troubled by what we see as gross constitutional abuses. You said when you spoke on behalf of the Constitution during the
and you know, if the pitcher says, I'm going to intentionally walk the next batter, the umpire can't say, no, I think you ought to pitch to him. That's not the job of the umpire. The umpire is to resolve disputes. The job of the judge is to resolve disputes. For doing this kind of thing, they said judges are supposed to play a and beyond any doubt that I never met the woman who accused me. She admits it in a.
So he's talking about Jeffrey Epstein's Island, where Dershowitz was on the manifest for the Lolita Express. So he literally went to Epstein's Island, and on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, along with other people like Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and other celebrities and politicians, where they supposedly fornicated with not just human trafficked women, but like children. Let's see what he says.
Speaking,
wow.
No, that I was completely innocent. They said.
Oh, and by the way, Dershowitz also defended Jeffrey Epstein to get him off the hook.
We know you didn't do this, but you've been accused, and we don't want trouble. So that's where I got the title for my book, From the 92nd Street Why. If you're
So he wrote a book trying to defend himself, and he's also saying all the Jeffrey Epstein accusers are somehow liars or whatever, and he had nothing to do with it. He's somehow innocent.
accused, guilty, we don't care about the evidence. That's not relevant. It's Alice in Wonderland. Sentence first, verdict, and then the evidence.
Yeah, he's the victim. Okay, so
I'm not going to mention names, where I took the case thinking the defendant was absolutely guilty, and then I learned he was totally innocent. There was no crime. And I had another case where I was I did absolutely nothing wrong. Why should I be afraid to answer questions? I immediately, the day I was accused, said, open book. Look at.
You're able to speak about this attorney-client privilege.
So it goes on about Jeffrey Epstein, the Clinton Global Initiative, which facilitated a lot of this, which he was the attorney for.
No, I don't. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. Who was part of the Global Initiative?
Well, this is an article from Yahoo News that says billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein, who was indicted.
It's very common. It's the first I've known about this.
Blah, blah,
disease
blah,
that
blah.
will kill you. You have the right to refuse that, but you have no right to refuse to be vaccinated against.
So now they move on to vaccines, and Dershowitz is trying to make the case that the government can force you to vaccinate whether you like it or not, because let's hear what he has to say.
A contagious disease. Public health, the police power of the Constitution, gives the state the power to compel that, and there are cases in the United States Supreme Court. Case that pops into my head, I may have the name wrong, is Jacobson. I think probably I have it right. Check it out. You'll see that there are cases after cases after cases that the public health permits reasonable actions to prevent the spread of communicable diseases. Most of them grow out of tuberculosis.
So the reason why this question came up was because of the coronavirus, where everybody's being locked in or the economy is being shut down until there is a vaccine. And so then the notion is that if you want, when we do have the vaccine and they start opening back up, the government will compel vaccination and add it to the vaccination schedule, which means that if your children go to school, they have to have the coronavirus vaccine in addition to 20 other vaccines in order to attend school. But not just attend school, get a driver's license, get a passport, travel, get a job, work for the government, not work for the government, whatever. Even if you go to prison, you're going to have a vaccine schedule. So they're talking about compelled vaccines. And Dershowitz making the case that the government has the right and the legal authority under the Constitution somehow, which it doesn't, to do this because of other cases that happened since then. Even though the Constitution says that any right that's not enumerated here is held by the people, not by the government.
Tuberculosis cases in the early 20th century, but some are more recent than that. But there's still an issue of whether the governor has the authority to create laws, and that's a matter of state legislation. Yeah.
But you've opened up a whole new area here. So the governor has the right, or sorry, the government has the right to force someone to be vaccinated. But how do we know what they're providing us from a medical standpoint is accurate? There are doctors who argue that Anthony Fauci is totally wrong in his assessment, and it certainly seems like week to week, month to month, they don't seem to know anything about this virus.
I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a lot. I wrote an article early on pointing out two fundamental errors right away. But that's what a democracy is about. And if the majority of the people agree and support that for public health measures, you have to be vaccinated, you have to be vaccinated. They should give you an alternative. The alternative is to live in your home. Don't get vaccinated, but never, ever leave your home or live in a bubble. But if you want to interact with other people, you cannot become Typhoid Mary. The Constitution doesn't give you the right to spread your illness to other people. And you can disagree, you can be a dissenter, you can leave the country, you can go into a bubble. But what you can't do is say, I don't disagree, I don't agree with Fauci, therefore I'm going to take the law into my own hands and decide to spread the disease. That's not a constitutional right. Sorry.
But Professor Dershowitz, how can you support a law that's made on the determination by a doctor? If you went to the doctor today and he determined that we need to chop off your leg, wouldn't you get a second opinion before you went and did what that doctor said?
I wouldn't have him. I wouldn't even listen to that doctor. We're not talking about it based on a doctor. We're talking about it based on a legislature, based on the legislature's decision being upheld by the highest courts and by the Supreme Court. We're talking about democracy. Doctor doesn't make the decision. The decision's made by the government through democratic means. And if the decision is made by the government, if they told you you had to cut off your leg, that would be unconstitutional because your leg doesn't help them. Let's assume that doctor says to you, unless you cut off your
blah blah blah. he's lawyering this. I mean, this is bullshit. It's compelled vaccination is what they're talking about. So getting to the part where I got content striked. Let's get to the part where I was supposedly struck from YouTube, Facebook. Let's see here. Fact check. Let's look at the fact check. Fact check. So something about Bill Gates. We haven't even gotten to Bill Gates. This is a long video. How are you supposed to be responsible for everything uttered in a 40-minute video? Anti-vaccine video falsely claims to expose a purported Bill Gates plan to depopulate Africa. Okay, so something about Africa. And let's get to that point. So, 27.
Professor Dershowitz, that there are nanotechnology groups.
Leave New York. If you tell them you want to give up your American citizenship and go to another country, learned about some of the activities, and he was friendly. Okay, so Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates is somehow related to the vaccine argument that he was making earlier. With Bill Gates, he was friendly with.
But the fact is, he engaged in these activities, and Bill Gates seems to be connected to each of the people that I'm speaking about: Charles Lieber, Marvin Minsky, millions and millions of dollars to Harvard.
I've never met Bill Gates. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you've met Bill Gates. I'm just saying that Jeffrey Epstein has met Bill Gates.
Sure.
In the book.
So here is Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer talking about who wrote on the Lolita Express, in addition to Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. And they've never met, apparently.
Filthy Rich by James Patterson. He says that Jeffrey Epstein had a trading floor on his 727 jet. Now, of course, that's going to mean there's just a computer data center there. I don't know if James Patterson would necessarily know a trade jet. He was a professor at Dalton School, have a master's degree in teaching. A lot of
anybody in the government ever told him to lay off Epstein. Nobody laid off Epstein. We got the deal because we had a stronger case. They couldn't prove that he had ever transported any particular woman in interstate commerce who was underage for purposes of sex. And so if you can't prove that, you can't make your case. I do think, I've only met Acosta one or two occasions. I do think he got a bum rap. I think he died years before. So
Maxine Gladwell, who's now in custody after the Jeffrey Epstein suicide, in custody.
This happened.
But he's always pictured with his beloved daughter, and she seems to be
Wouldn't you
good.
Pictured with her beloved daughter? I'm pictured with my beloved daughter.
With this from an evidentiary standpoint, this photo appeared in 2019, and I'm sure you're aware, Ghislaine Maxwell is about 57 years old. This is quite obviously a retouched photo, and her complexion is
we would have gotten a total acquittal.
Involved in
Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Harvey Weinstein. That's a damning picture. But where's the part about Bill Gates? So what was the bit about Bill Gates?
I'm not suggesting that you've met Bill Gates. I'm just saying that Jeffrey Epstein has met Bill Gates.
Sure.
In the book, University.
How hard it is to get legislation enacted in this country. You've got to get the House of Representatives. You've got to get the Senate to approve the Senate.
When I hear about...
I've never heard of that. I've never met Bill Gates. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you've met Bill Gates. I'm just saying that Jeffrey Epstein has met Bill Gates.
Sure.
In the book Filthy Rich by James Patterson, he says that Jeffrey Epstein had a trading floor on his 727 jet. Now, of course, that's going to mean there's just a computer data center there. I don't know if James Patterson would necessarily know a trade get this $500 million fortune. Charles Ortel tells us there's no records of him conducting any trades at all. He never graduated from college as far as we know, but yet he was a professor at Dalton.
All the money that he handled for less. Okay,
so I'm not getting the part about Bill Gates. What is wrong about Bill Gates according to Facebook or this fact check? The 30-minute video features several clips of people condemning the purported forceful vaccination, including one that shows Paloma commenting on an interview between Professor Allard Dershowitz and Jason Goodman, host of the web show Crowdsource the Truth. If you refuse to be vaccinated, the state has the power to literally blah, blah, blah. Crowdsource. At no point in the interview did he mention Africa or Bill Gates. He goes on to say the Constitution gives the blah, blah, blah. Dershowitz is well known in the U.S. for standing up for the rights. Human trial, a new COVID-19. South Africa's human trial of the Oxford vaccine came after two people, including British microbiologists, at least had received injections of the vaccine developed by researchers from Oxford Jenner Institute, blah, blah, blah. Africans and Microsoft founder Bill Gates are common subjects of debate surrounding COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus. Africa has recorded more than 1 million coronavirus cases. Online post warning Africans of the purported harm of COVID. Vaccine conspiracy theorists accusing Gates of plotting to reduce the global population through deadly vaccine and other scandals involving Western doctors effectively using black people as genuine guinea pigs have all been part of waves of misinformation in the race to find a vaccine for the novel coronavirus. AFP fact check recently debunked claims that Gates plotted the mass sterilization of millions of Africans during the 2014 tetanus immunization program that targeted women of childbearing age. Okay, so I didn't see that come up in the video. I'm sure if I spent some more time on it, we might find an instance of it. So I don't see how you could be responsible for someone uttering that, anything close to that, even though I couldn't find it, by sharing a link. But somehow, if you share the link, you too will lose all your privileges on Facebook. Let's go ahead, since we're on the subject, let's go ahead and go. Bill Gates, Africa, vaccine depopulation. And by the way, that is a subject Bill Gates likes to talk about. Bill Gates, population control. So he does go on to talk about how we need to control the population. Here's a famous video of him with a well-produced video talking about overpopulation.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers. One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem? What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very...
And by the way, that's what he wants, less children.
Very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health. So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down, and so we can feel great about saving those lives.
You know what's funny about that is now that he mentions it, Bill Gates, TED Talk, innovation to zero, something like that. And so in this video, he talks about, let's see here. He talks about CO2, and the thing about CO2 is as there's more people use more services, which use more energy or oil or something to that effect, which will create more CO2. So if you want more CO2, which he attributes to global warming, have more people, which will use more services, which will use more energy. But if you want less CO2, you need less people, which will use less services, which will lead to less energy consumption and therefore less CO2. So somewhere in here he talks about that. Let's see if we can find it.
Straightforward one. If you sum up the CO2 that gets emitted, that leads to a temperature increase. And that temperature increase leads to some very negative effects. The effects on the weather, perhaps worse, the indirect effects in that the natural ecosystems can't adjust to these rapid changes, and so you get ecosystem collapses. Now, the exact amount of how you map from a certain increase in of CO2 to what temperature will be and where the positive feedbacks are, there's some uncertainty there, but not very much. And there's certainly uncertainty about how bad those effects will be, but they will be extremely bad. Factors, changes that...
So, I mean, basically he's talking about global carbon emissions from energy production, and this is where he comes up with this famous equation that leads people to believe that he's using global warming as an excuse for population control.
Just that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses everything: the food we eat, clothing, TV, heating. These are very good things. Getting rid of poverty means providing these services to almost everyone on the planet. And it's a great thing for this number to go up. In the rich world, perhaps the top 1 billion, we probably could cut back and use less. But every year, this number on average is going to go up. And so overall, that will more than double the services delivered per person. Here we have a very basic service. Do you have lighting in your house to be able to read your homework? And in fact, these kids don't, so they're going out and reading their schoolwork under the street lamps. Now, efficiency, E, the energy for each service, here finally we have some good news. We have something that's not going up. Through various inventions and new ways of doing lighting, through different types of cars, different ways of building buildings, this is the amount of CO2 put out for each unit of energy. And so the question is, can you actually get that to zero? If you burn coal, no. If you burn natural gas, no. Almost every way we make electricity today, except for the emerging renewables and nuclear, puts out CO2. And so what we're going to have to do at a global scale is create a new system. And so we need...
So, anyways, he jokes, I don't know where in this video, but somewhere, he's like, if you know anything about multiplication, and the goal is to get to zero, one of those variables has to be zero. So 1 multiplied by 0 is 0. 1 multiplied by 1, multiplied by 1, multiplied by 0 is still 0. So the only thing in there that's driving the other three variables, services is... which begets energy, which begets CO2. The thing that's driving those three variables is the number of people. So if you have 0 people, you have 0 CO2. And if the goal is to get to 0, that's the number you need to zero out. And that sounds like eugenics. That sounds like straight up eugenics. And that's the whole issue about Bill Gates depopulating the world, not just through energy, but like through birth control. And the other reason why people say Bill Gates is a eugenicist is because Bill Gates says he's a eugenicist. He talks about it often, as you can see, but he also, his dad was Bill Gates' father was president of Planned Parenthood. Let's take a he's talked about this in several interviews. Take away Bill Gates' father, talked about head of Planned Parenthood.
It really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that.
Okay, so there's one interview. Let's see if we can find, because maybe he misspoke. Maybe he didn't mean it. Let's see what this one says.
His father was one of the main grandfathers of the whole entire eugenics movement here inside the United States. And it's still going strong today.
My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial.
And Bill Gates is here once again pushing the GMOs and everything else that is...
Let's see here. Because I've seen him talk about it multiple times, not just... I mean, he even talked about it with Warren Buffett a couple times. Let's take another look. Bill Gates, his father.
Yeah, you'll be taking questions from the audience.
Support that, and yet it was a cool opportunity. I missed a fair bit of my senior year.
It's going to take me a while to scrub through these videos to find the clips, but there's newer ones where he talks about it, and Bill Gates Sr. Conversations, Bill Gates Sr. advocates for the estate tax, Bill Gates Sr. dies at 94. So there's a bunch of the stuff. You guys can look it up. Let's also go to Bill Gates TED Talk vaccines. In here, he talks about the next outbreak. I don't know if that's the right one, but it could be. And what I'm recalling and I'm trying to find, and usually this is better for documentary purposes, and you go find the actual right clip. Here's one with Bill Gates on population control or population growth. He contradicts
Let's go to a
himself,
couple
too.
questions that we've actually received. How do you expect this to be addressed?
Well, the population growth issue at the global level is not that daunting. That is, the population percentage-wise is growing slower today than in the past, and so it will actually peak out. The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population.
Hence why they're talking about Africa.
By 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Northern Nigeria, Yemen, Chad. And so what we need to do is take this aid generosity and this innovation and go into those places, offer the women better tools where they want to space birthing or have a smaller family size, and improve health, because it's amazing.
Improving health means less family.
As children survive, parents feel like they'll have enough kids to support them in their old age, and so they choose to have less children. Niger right now, it's still 7 children per family, whereas in the richer countries, you're often at a stable point of what.
So, I mean, there's a bunch of these videos, but I'm thinking this one might be it. But basically, in this video, what I'm hoping we'll see is the part where Bill Gates talks about going to Africa because they have the fastest growing population due to poverty. And then offering services, health, he always calls it offering them health services and education. But he says that the health services will lead to Planned Parenthood, which leads to birth control. So there'll be fewer kids. Education means that you're going to tie, especially women in education, so to prepare them for the workforce. Because if women are working or wrapped up in education until their 30s, they have fewer children. They don't have children in their teens or their 20s. They'll have it in their 30s, which means they only get to have 1 or 2 before they hit the wall and are no longer viable or able to have children. And so he's like education, health. These are work equality, for women means that women will have fewer children. The family would be destroyed in various ways. He doesn't say that part, but that's what the intended effect is. Let's see if we can find it.
We didn't have a medical team ready to go who would have gone. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to these countries, and a large epidemic would require us to have a global.
Notice how he's using the Ebola this time around, but in 2020 it's coronavirus, and another year it was H1N1, and another year it was measles, and another year is polio. But in each case, they want to come into one of these countries, start handing out vaccines, birth control, and education.
Global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics.
And this is way back when. Which year was 2015? They're already working with the WHO. They're already funding the WHO, the World Health Organization. They're already in cooperation about how do we have an effect on population control.
Epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about. Now in the movies, it's quite different. There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood. The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola. Let's look at the progression of Ebola over this year. About 10,000 people died, and nearly all were in the 3 West African countries. There's 3 reasons why it didn't spread more. The first is there was a lot of heroic work, and we might not be so lucky. You could die from that epidemic.
So they're saying, oh, look at how horrible this is. So many people died. Yet the real goal is to prevent billions from being born. Let's see.
Time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen. So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness.
And it has to be global health. It's not regional, it's not local, it's not continental or national, it's global. They want global health. They want to control the world population.
The best lessons, I think, on how to get prepared are, again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly.
Notice how he's talking about NATO and UN and global. He's not talking about America per se, although America funds a lot of these things. Notice how he's talking about World Health Organization, the WHO. He's not talking about nationalistic things. He's talking about globalistic things. They want control at a global level.
Rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check are people well trained.
And it's war games.
Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go. So those are the kinds of things we need to deal with an epidemic. What are the key pieces? First is we need strong health systems in poor countries. That's where...
In poor countries. Not rich countries, poor countries.
Mothers can give birth safely, kids can get all their vaccines, but...
Kids get vaccines.
Also where we'll see the outbreak very early on. We need a medical reserve corps. Lots of people who've got the training and background who are not war games, so that we see where the holes are. But I'm quite sure it's very modest compared to the potential harm.
So I'm not seeing the particular video clip that I was thinking about. Global Vaccine Summit. Let's check out, for case in point, Event 201. This blew my mind when I saw it. So Event 201 is about somewhere in October of 2019 or maybe September of 2019 before the COVID outbreak. And by the way, they were in 2015 or 16. Bill Gates was prophesizing supposedly about future virus outbreaks that would require, vaccines, and that's why he's investing billions and billions of dollars in it. But really, when he talks about investing billions, he's going to produce or corner the market on vaccine production and then get paid back and make a lot of money. But I don't think that's the real intent of why he's doing it. I think it's more of because he has all the money he needs. Like, he's not in it for money. This is power. And anyways, in Event 201, which was 2019, not 2015, they play out or war game the coronavirus several months before coronavirus actually happens. So let's check this out.
The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million.
Notice the date, October 18th, 2019. In America, this didn't come out until February, and it didn't go into effect until March. In China, it didn't start until December, I believe. But yet, in October, they're wargaming how the spread of a coronavirus, notice COVID-19 is coronavirus 2019. COVID has been, it's a variation of the swine flu, I believe, or they were for some reason calling it the bat flu, but in this video they point to swine flu. COVID is a variation of the common cold, I guess. If you take the bioweapon lab variation or explanation, it's a cross between HIV and COVID, but I have more to say about that, especially as it relates to Dr. Fauci. But anyways, they name COVID here in October 2018. They call it COVID-19 because it outbroke somewhere in China during that time, and it spread globally. But they're already wargaming, and they're already talking about pressuring governors and stuff to do the right thing, to lock down and to, push for vaccines and all these draconian rules, and then also pointing to China as the example of how to deal with this. So let's briefly look at this video. I don't want to spend too much time. You can go ahead and Google and YouTube this, but I'm sure eventually they'll take this down.
Million cases.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
We have known about caps-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this: how should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
Just to underscore the point that cooperation among supply chain providers or businesses that have huge supply.
So as you can see, they're pretending. This is a mock conference. They're pretending that this happened, and they're all coordinating, and they're saying collegial, smart things that somehow prove the point that they need to work together and create a global vaccine, and then eventually get to forced or compelled vaccines and add it to the vaccine schedule. And guess who's going to corner the market on that? Mr. Bill Gates himself. But it's not just the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's also all the other NGOs. It's the Rockefellers, who have a long history in eugenics. It's also Carnegie Mellon. Some of the new, or their buddies, the Buffett Foundation. There's a whole bunch of NGOs. I don't know them all. I mean, if Clinton Foundation was still around, I would say them. They disbanded because of the whole Hillary thing, but it's still going on. And look, Event 201, the pandemic exercise highlight reel, is showing. Look, GNN. It's supposed to be an acronym that CNN special report. They did a mock report. Here's what it's supposed to look like.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
If there's some sense that there's a UN institution that can do all of this, then I worry we're suffering from a delusional disorder on the power of the UN. It's really important to get those industries and...
Notice how they're talking about the UN. They're saying the UN has to take control. NATO has to be deployed. They're taking sovereignty away or action away from individual nation states and blah, 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 blah. And they're acting like it's real. This is not real. This is a staged event that happened in October. Martin, Knuckle, whatever.
Verify this. Otherwise, if we go down to 20% bookings over a long period, the company will run down. That's a fact.
Yeah, there's a whole complex set of issues in a highly interdependent world.
Okay, so there's a bunch of that. I was looking for the one that actually had the swine flu explanation in it. I'm not seeing it.
Hello, everyone.
Make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those. So anyways,
Really
as you can see, Bill Gates has been at the center of this. But, you know, we were talking about, sorry to digress so far off path, about the fact check about Bill Gates somehow being depopulation Africa. So let's look that up. If I could type today, it would be nice. Bill Gates, Africa, depopulation. There's a bunch of information on this.
The population of Africa is set to almost double by 2050, raising fears that progress in fighting poverty and disease will be reversed. So,
September 18th, 2018.
what can be done to ensure that poverty doesn't increase? And how can a disproportionately large youth population help drive progress? With me to discuss all of this and more is Bill Gates. Bill, are we at a turning point where regression is a real risk?
Well, first, the progress over the last several decades has been pretty amazing, both reducing childhood death, getting kids in school, getting agricultural productivity up, and reducing extreme poverty. But it's really Africa that still has a doubling in population to 2050 and probably another doubling to 2100, where you really have to do a good job if you're trying to get these extreme poverty rates down. So if we don't do better in investing in human capital in Africa, yes, the number of people in extreme poverty is actually going to go up.
Here, I believe, is Bill Gates. No, that's not Bill Gates. Here's Bill Gates. Has a warning about deadly epidemics.
I think
January of 2017.
an epidemic, either naturally caused or intentionally caused, is the most likely thing to...
Notice how he said it in either naturally or intentionally caused. So he acknowledged both, January, so that's almost 2016, but 2017, January 2016.
Cause,
17.
say, 10 million excess deaths. And that it's pretty surprising how little preparedness there is for it. Now, it's tricky because this is a global problem, so how do countries work together? Which countries should put up what resources? And every aspect of it, the resources to go.
Here's another
Foundation,
one. Bill Gates on the next great epidemic.
It has helped to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria.
That could let us develop in less than a year a novel vaccine. They're called DNA RNA vaccines, and so we'll fund a few projects to build specific vaccines, but not only will we get that, we'll prove out that these platforms can work, we'll understand the regulatory issues, and it gives us a chance of being able to respond in time when the next epidemic hits.
So here's Bill Gates during the epidemic of March 26, 2020, talking about coronavirus.
Because folks people who want sort of county by county or say, let's get back online faster, say, well, look, in some states there's less than 200 cases. In many states there's less than 200 cases right now. You're saying even in those states, the same kind of shutdown needs to occur?
Well, let's say you have 100 cases, and let's say you don't do a shutdown, then it grows 33% per day. So you take 100, you get 1,000, you get 10,000. It's exponential growth. If you're not stopping it, the sooner you engage in the shutdown, the easier it is to get to that peak. We have not peaked. The parts of the country that aren't shut down, in late April, we should start to see the numbers peak there. They'll still be too high to open up. So you'll probably have to go another month to really get those numbers down. But any part of the country that has cases, and truthfully, because of our problems with testing, because we're not prioritizing testing the right way, that a lot of those places actually do have cases. But even if they have the 100, that will grow, and people do cross county boundaries. And so basically the whole country needs to do what was done in the part of China where they had these infections.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out again that states that had just a few cases last week have over 1,000 or sometimes 2,000 cases this week, to your point, Bill. The other thing I'm curious about, we keep hearing that the virus is going to dictate the timeline. Dr. Fauci has said that. When you look at this virus, we got 3.5 months worth of data now, 150 countries. If you apply all the analytics that Microsoft, all the analytics that we can possibly apply to this, is how this is going to sort of progress and end knowable? I mean, can you give a clear answer depending on what sort of mitigation measures we have in place?
It's very likely that rich countries who uniformly throughout their country do a serious shutdown, that they will be able to avoid a high percentage of their population getting infected. That's what the exemplars, like some of the work in China and South Korea, are telling us. Now, as you get to poorer countries, the difficulty of doing the isolation, where you live close by in slums, where you have to go out every day to get your food, it is going to be much, much tougher. And so, by summer, I think the rich countries that have been competently led on this will not have to go back into shutdown. And, from the disease point of view, they'll avoid very large numbers of deaths. And so in that phase, we still will have a challenge with the developing countries.
One of the things that Dr. Fauci actually said in our last hour, which really concerned me, and I was asking him about the states that, I think there's more than a dozen or so that have just 100 or 200 reported cases. He was saying how it's critical.
So I'm still looking for the specifics on the Bill Gates Africa conspiracy theory, but there was also, it relates to Bill Gates Foundation in India and polio. And right now, the coronavirus Bill Gates conspiracy theory is even being addressed here on CCTV, which is China something censored, or China something television. And here they are.
我注意到，在美国也会有一些网友甚至攻击您，说病毒是从您疫苗的这个研制过程中出来的。您在用什么样的心态面对这种声音？
I'd say it's ironic if you take somebody who's doing their best to get the world ready and, putting, in my case, billions of dollars into these tools for infectious diseases and really trying to solve broadly infectious diseases, including those that can cause pandemics. But that, we're in a crazy situation, so there's going to be crazy rumors. I hope whether it's individuals or countries, then in some ways this shows us how interdependent we are. That to stop a global pandemic, we need to find whoever's the best, whatever the best vaccine construct are, the best drugs, and we need to make it without just focusing on one country. We need to make it for the entire world, including for countries that don't have the resources to pay for vaccine research or vaccine factories. You know, they're actually, in many ways, should be the priority for what we do. So, you know, there's lots of attacks out there. In general, people have been very positive.
There was another issue with Bill Gates. Here's Bill Gates' focus on polio.
I know that much of your annual letter is focused this year on the campaign to eradicate polio, a disease that struck fewer than 1,500 people last year. And yet you mentioned there are 33 million people living with AIDS, and that in 2009, more than 780,000 people died from malaria. So I'm curious why the focus on polio this year? What captured your imagination when it comes to this particular disease?
We spend the majority of our money on health issues, but polio rises to the top because we have a unique opportunity over the next several years to eradicate the disease. Only smallpox was ever eradicated, so this would be the second. And if you don't intensify, if you don't raise the money and get it down to zero, it'll come back, and that means it'll be crippling and killing over 100,000 kids a year. So the value of making sure you've got the budget and the intensity to get rid of it, it pays off unbelievably because no child will ever be crippled again.
Do you think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that polio hasn't already been eradicated? Because certainly when most Americans think of this disease, they think of the 1950s and they think of the vaccine that I know I took in first grade when they gave you those little sugar cubes. And why hasn't it been completely eradicated worldwide?
Well, the rich countries have done a great job of eradication. And rich countries take care of themselves, that's fine. In 1988, when it was gone from the rich countries, it was still killing or paralyzing over 300,000. And that's when people said, this is such an injustice. Let's raise the money and get rid of it. And now we're close, 99.
So the Bill Gates India polio vaccine created a huge upstir where people are now claiming that the Gates Foundation vaccine for polio created vaccine-derived polio, meaning that the vaccine gave people polio, which crippled tons of people. Let's see if
Tonight, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will honor the Prime Minister of India for the work that he's done to improve sanitation in his country.
But the international prize is sparking some outrage. King 5's Natalie Swaby is here to explain what the controversy is all about. Natalie.
Oh yeah, you know, the Gates Foundation had protesters show up in front of their building demanding this award be rescinded. They say it's because of the Prime Minister's human rights record. Tonight, we hear from a local organizer with the group Justice for All. He grew up in India. He used to work for Microsoft and says the Gates Foundation does great work, but he wants them to reconsider this award.
This past Sunday, this picture was taken outside of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with demonstrators delivering the message, toilets will never erase torture.
We have protested, we have been protesting and requesting the Gates Foundation to rescind this award.
Javed Sikander of Redmond is referring to the honor the Gates Foundation is giving India Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his Clean India mission, promoting toilet access across a country that's been plagued with a persistent sanitation problem.
A leader who has been oppressing his own people.
He says petitions have poured in with 100,000 signatures urging Gates to not award Modi, citing the leader's human rights record.
There were thousands of people who were killed on the streets, and at that time the chief minister of that state of Gujarat was Prime Minister Modi. Personally for me, that was a turning point.
He says that happened in 2002 and suggests recent events provide more reason to protest.
To just understand what's going on in Kashmir. So for 50 days, there has been no phones. All the landlines as well as the cellular phones and the internet has been completely blocked.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation released a statement that in part says Modi is receiving an award, noting that before the Clean India mission, over 500 million people in India did not have access to safe sanitation, and now the majority do.
All that effort is down the drain when you are oppressing people and committing these massive human rights violations. So any good that you did by building toilets, compared to the lives that has been taken during all these lynchings and now the shutdown of Kashmir, just don't, these don't.
Okay, that part I didn't know. I haven't heard that one. No, but it's specifically sterilization death triggered outrage in India.
Anger is growing in central India, where at least a dozen women have died. Dozens more have become ill after more than 80 women were sterilized by just one doctor on a single day. The surgeries took place over the weekend under a controversial national program aimed at limiting India's massive population. The exact cause of death isn't clear yet, but a team of doctors has been flown in from New Delhi to deal with the crisis.
Our main concern at this time, I repeat, our main concern at this time is to ensure that there are no more casualties.
4 government doctors have been...
Okay, I'm not sure that has anything to do with Bill Gates, but notice how a sterilization death due to sterilization, meaning that they were giving birth control or makes them unable to have children, and maybe that was delivered through a vaccine, maybe that was delivered through some other malicious means, but I don't know if that has anything to do with the Bill Gates Foundation, so I'm going to stop it there. But I do know, I'm trying to look for, this is why this is better in documentary form, where you could take the time to actually get the bits and pieces specifically that relates. Bill Gates discusses vaccine race India. Well, let's see what Bill Gates has to say about India specifically. Okay, I don't appreciate that where they don't let them speak, because I think at the very least you should let Bill Gates speak. Bill and Melinda Gates, poverty, tech talks, Melinda Gates on India projects. Let's hear what Melinda has to say.
Very special guest. We are being joined now by Melinda Gates, who is, of course, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates.
And this is March 26, 2010. So, as you can see, the Gates have been at this since 2000, I believe, or 2003, somewhere in there. Ever since Bill stepped down from Microsoft as CEO, but I think he always maintained like president of or chairman of the board until like 2016 or 2017, and then he went full-time to the foundation, but he's been doing the foundation since 2000-ish.
The Gates Foundation, it's the single largest philanthropic organization in the world. Melinda, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. So what's it, 30 or 35 billion dollars that you've got, and you have to give away 1.5 billion dollars a year. So how do you deal with that pressure of giving away $1.5 billion every single year?
No, not at all. In fact, Bill and I love the progress that we're seeing on the ground, and we feel like our money is just there to help with so many of the causes that are needed. So no, Bill and I very much enjoy what we're doing with the foundation.
Okay. Melinda, what exactly, if you could just run us through, what exactly has brought you to India right now? Why are you here at this moment?
Well, I really wanted to see what's going on with a lot of these maternal and child issues, because India, when you look at the maternal and child deaths that happen around the world, 9 million deaths happen for children under the age of 5 across the globe. Almost 2 million of those deaths happen here in India. And I wanted to see the progress that the government was making with the National Rural Health Mission, as well as see a couple of the projects that we're working on the ground in conjunction with the National Rural Health Mission, and see how those are coming together to make progress against these maternal and child death issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about Abahan, of course, which is the work which you're doing on AIDS. It's one of your biggest campaigns here in India. How do you think that's progressing, and do you think the fight against AIDS is going well, partly with the help of Abahan?
Well, we've been very committed for a number of years in India around the AIDS issue. We have one of our largest programs around AIDS is actually in India. It's a program called Avahan that was started a number of years ago here. So we're very committed to AIDS. Polio still is endemic in India. It's only in 107 blocks still in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. So we're working very closely with the Indian government on their commitment around polio. We're very excited about that. We're working on raising the immunization rates because that will help with these childhood deaths.
So as you can see, they're very concerned with India and polio. I can't find the videos specifically that I'm thinking of, so I'm just going to stop harping on that for a little while. But here is Louis Farrakhan about compelled vaccines as it relates to vaccines in Africa, because obviously, he's about the black community and is it Muslim or Islam or something like that? And his concern is with those people, and he's saying, hey, don't take the vaccines because you might get sterilized or they might pump in poison or whatever. And so while I don't know that much about Farrakhan specifically, he is harping on that particular point, and he has been deplatformed recently. So let's see what Farrakhan has to say about this.
I say to my brothers and sisters in Africa, if they come up with a vaccine, be careful.
July 4th, 2020.
Don't let them vaccinate you with their history of treachery through vaccines, through medication. Are you listening? I say to the African presidents, do not take their medications. I say to those of us in America, we need to call a meeting of our skilled virologists, epidemiologists, students of biology and chemistry. And we need to look at not only what they give us, we need to give ourselves something better. So my teacher told me, don't speak for some, speak for the whole. And now I'm speaking for Black America, for Hispanic America, for the Native American, and for those who are desirous of life. They're making money now, plotting to give 7,500,000,000 people a vaccination. Dr. Fauci, Bill Gates and Melinda, you want to depopulate the earth. What the hell gives you that right? Who are you to sit down with your billions and talk about who can live and who should die? That's why your world is coming to an end quickly, because you have sentenced billions to death, but God is now sentencing you to the death that you are sentencing to others. Yes, Allah is great. So whether I'm present or absent, the Executive Council of the Nation of Islam must call our scientists. Come and let's sit down. Our virologists, our epidemiologists, those of us who know the science. We cannot let them bring anything to us that we don't dissect. Don't you take a vaccine unless you say to our people, we've checked it out. And you better be of the truthful ones. But Farrakhan, if we don't take the vaccine, we're sure to die. You're dying for sure now. They want to quicken death. Yes, brothers and sisters, they are in the Bible as the pale horse of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The pale horse had a rider, his rider was death. And everywhere that pale horse went, hell followed behind. This is your history. You're angry with me. I'll take it. Because the two that back me are very angry with you. And the righteous are becoming more angry with you with every passing day. Imagine some Caucasians sitting in a room.
In the last 2 days, we've seen a remarkable debate.
So, anyways, not to get into Farrakhan or that whole community, but he is making a cogent point, which is, let's go back here. Farrakhan is making a cogent point. Like, he too thinks that you don't know what's in that vaccine. Nobody knows what's in that vaccine. In fact, there's a whole movement called anti-vaccine who are complaining that while the polio vaccine in its infancy was a huge blessing to man, it turned into some pharmaceutical grade thing that we have no idea what it is or what it does or what the side effects are, and that's turned into a huge debate. And so now you're seeing that anyone who questions what they call the science of vaccines, you're somehow stupid or ignorant or repugnant or want all these bad things. And to share a video, how did we even start with this thing? To share a video about Bill Gates. It wasn't even about Bill Gates initially. It was about, that's not the right one. They don't even show you what the original video was about. They just said, hey, you mentioned Bill Gates, and therefore, I think it was a Dr. It was Dershowitz and Bill Gates somehow being related to the... Yeah, it was Dershowitz saying the government has the right to force vaccinate the people. So he was making an argument that the state has the right to vaccinate people. And then that turned into Jeffrey Epstein, which turned into people on the Lolita Express that ended up on the Epstein Island, which mentioned Bill Gates. Okay, so that turned into this giant tangent. And who knew that that was even in that video? To be honest, I didn't know. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched like maybe 10 minutes of the thing, and I thought Dershowitz's arguments were kind of repugnant. So I shared it so that I usually share videos that I see to bookmark them so I could look at them later, but I also make them public so that other people can follow along and spark discussions or debates. But Facebook decided, oh, well, that's enough to remove you from advertising or having a voice on Facebook in general. Now, why would Facebook care about Bill Gates? Well, could it be that, let's see here, Facebook... Microsoft investment. Didn't they give them $2 billion? A decade ago, this week, on October 24th, 2007, Facebook announced that Microsoft would invest $240 million in the fast-growing social network, expanding an advertising partnership between the companies, but mostly because the investment assigned Facebook a $15 billion valuation that to many seemed shockingly high. So that kept Facebook out of acquisition territory. So Google or Yahoo couldn't buy them for $1 billion because their valuation was at $15 billion, but it gave $240 million cash that allowed Facebook to compete with Google and Yahoo and even Microsoft. But Microsoft has a vested interest in Facebook's success. So there you go. Facebook and Microsoft are sister companies, or part of the Microsoft portfolio at the very least. And with these 5 strikes, this was enough. And this wasn't even me making content. This video I'm making is content. I'm not even saying I fully agree with everything we're watching here. I'm just reviewing the information as we see it. But to share the link on Facebook is enough to get you banned because of the presidential elections coming up. Because if you're somehow contradicting the official narrative, you too will be limited. You too will have no voice. You can't say anything. You can't advertise, even though the Supreme Court has ruled that, yeah, money is speech. You can advertise. If you are an American, you have all of this is protected by the First Amendment. So everything Facebook is doing at this moment is anti-constitutional. Now, if they seize power, it's irrelevant what the Constitution is. If they lose the election, it 100% matters what the Constitution means, because we're a nation of laws. We're governed by laws. We're not governed by a dictator. And so if they keep shredding the Constitution, this doesn't matter. If we preserve the Constitution, this does matter. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I've been at this for a while, so I'm going to stop here. And if you enjoyed going through information like this with me, please subscribe or share or whatever. If anything, I'm on Telegram, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation. Have a good night. Enjoy.